once again, good morning everyone. Welcome to the National Symposium 2025, organized by the Department of English and Humanities at University of Humanities. The theme of this year's symposium is LUTA, Ngũgĩ and the Battle for Language and Liberation, commemorating the life and work of Ngũgĩ, a novelist, playwright, translator, essayist, social activist, and knowledge from Kenya, who is revered for his contributions to preserve his country's language and culture. The symposium will feature an keynote parallel paper presentation on the theme by academics from different universities, institutions, special speaker sessions, and panel discussions by renowned scholars. Now, for the inaugural session of the symposium, may I invite the special advisor to the Board of Trustees of ULAB, Professor Shamsad, and the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University of LITERÁRIA, Professor Imran, to take their seats on the stage. We're still waiting for the Dean of School of Humanities to join us. Once he reaches, he will join us on the stage. First of all, I would now like to request Professor Shamsad, Special Advisor to the Board of Trustees, ULAB, to give his opening remarks about the symposium. Please welcome Professor Shamsad.
So the choice of language and the use of which language is put is central to a people's definition of themselves in relation to their nature and social environment, indeed in relation to the entire universe. So our Vice Chancellor, friends, colleagues, students, Assalamu alaikum, good morning. So we gather today to remember a writer whose words may outlive his life. Ngũgĩ is someone who dared to ask, whose language tells our story? As special advisor to the Board of Trustees, I see this conference today as a perfect resonance with ULAB's own ethos. We are a liberal arts university committed to critical inquiry and sustainability. The inclusion of Bangladesh in our name suggests that we want to create a space where ideas from our homeland converses with those from across the world. We teach our students not only to read, but to question, not only to write, but to imagine their place in the larger human story. By remembering Ngũgĩ today, we remind ourselves that the liberal arts is essential to the shaping of a free and self-aware society. As a professor of English, I have long admired Ngũgĩ's fierce intellectual courage. His recognizing the mind is more than a seminal text, it is a manifesto. He warned us that language is never neutral. It carries a memory of people, their worldview, their sense of dignity. His shift from writing in English to writing in Hebrew was a radical declaration that one's mother tongue is not a private possession, but a public right. A cultural inheritance that must be lived and renewed. For those of us who teach English in a post-colonial world, it challenges theory. We must teach the canon critically, aware of its histories of exclusion, and we must empower our students to inhabit English without surrendering their own language and identities. In Ngũgĩ's words and deeds, La LUTA continuum, the literary struggle continues. And as a conscientious citizen of the world, I feel the urgency of redefining decolonization for our own time. The map of empire may have changed, but the structural inequality persists today in subtle or more insidious forms. July has reminded us of such reality.
They live in the economics of publishing, in the politics of cultural visibility, in the unspoken hierarchies of knowledge. The global North and global South remain bound together in complex ways, and the work of decolonizing is not simply about dismantling yesterday's empires. It is about interrogating today's systems, from the flow of ideas to the algorithms that decide what we read, watch, and believe. Decolonization is not a slogan. It is a long, evolving process of justice-making that requires humility, solidarity, and imagination. Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o is no longer among us, but his voice remains a compass. He taught us that the struggle for cultural freedom is inseparable from the struggle for human freedom. In remembering him, we recommit ourselves as educators, as citizens, as inheritors of many intertwined histories, to carrying forward that struggle in our classroom, in our literature, and in the way we tell the story of our own people. I thank the Department of English and Humanities for this timely and necessary intervention. In honoring Ngũgĩ today, we honor the best of what the humanities can be, a space where language becomes a tool of liberation, where the literary struggle truly continues. La LUTA Literaria continua. Thank you.
Now I would like to request, thank you so much, Professor Shamsad Mortuza, for your opening remarks. Can I now request the Dean of School of Arts and Humanities, Professor Kaiser, to give his remarks for the symposium. Please welcome Professor Kaiser.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, distinguished Special Advisor to the Board of Trustees, participants, distinguished colleagues, guests, my apologies for being a little late. There was a glitch in coordination, as often happens. Now, I have nothing much to say. I mean, Ngũgĩ is not a writer I enjoy reading. You see. But he's a writer whom I respect. And I acknowledge that some of the ideas he has floated in the world of discourse will justly continue to exercise minds as the world keeps changing under various geopolitical, geoeconomic, and other forces. My take on Ngũgĩ starts in 1962 at a conference in Makerere, Uganda, where he and Chinua Achebe crossed swords. Achebe argued that in the multicultural, multilingual environment of Africa, a language inherited from the colonialists like English, or in Francophone Africa, French, Portuguese in Portuguese Africa, could be a viable medium of creative expression. Ngũgĩ opposed that idea and argued that he brought up the question of authenticity, that it's only in one's mother tongue that one can be authentic. And he had begun writing in English. He switched to his mother tongue, Gikuyu. But he didn't stop there. He started translating his own Gikuyu into English. He himself became a transnational Kenyan, settled in America. And interestingly, the theme of his later works is not a celebration of post-coloniality, but a sharp critique of the evils of many post-colonial societies. And that actually makes him kin to someone who is ideologically on the other side of the aisle, like V.S. Naipaul. Naipaul, too, is very sharp in his criticism of post-colonial societies. So is Ngũgĩ. Ngũgĩ suffered personally. He was put in jail, continued writing in jail, came out, and had to become a transnational individual. So did Chinua Achebe, incidentally. And Achebe's case is, again, very tragic, because at about the same time as the Bangladesh movement was gaining force, there was a murderous civil war in Nigeria when Biafra seceded. And that war cost many lives, including the lives of many highly talented writers and poets. After that war ended, and Achebe supported the Biafra movement. After that, he became transnational. In a sense, he lost his constituency. His career as a writer also ended, really. His last book is a very moving account. There Was a Country, which recalls the Biafran War and the dislocation that it caused. That is another aspect of post-colonial reality, which we often tend to brush aside as we talk about in purely ideological terms. Now, after Ngũgĩ relocated in America, he continued writing in Gikuyu, translating his own works into English. And I think by that time, a very sort of seismic shift had begun to take place in the global world of letters. And that is the rise of the concept of world literature. First broached by Goethe, further elaborated by Marx in the Communist Manifesto, and then when the discipline of comparative literature emerged, that also had a role in carrying this idea forward. At one time, in fact, when we were studying English literature, people would say, "What are you doing? This is dead, you see. You do comparative literature. Where does one do comparative literature? Are Jadavpure ache." That was the only university in this subcontinent which had a comparative literature department. Where is the comparative literature department in Jadavpur today? Is it in any way superior to the English department? Not at all. Literary studies has always been comparative. Whether you are studying Bangla or Sanskrit or English, you see, it is always comparative. And when it is comparative, it has to take on board all the cultures with which it interacts. And so we end up with the concept of world literature. And as world literature began to gain traction, translation began to play an increasingly important role. And Ngũgĩ, because he had himself begun as a translator of his own works, reflected on that. And he ended up describing translation as the, it's a very interesting passage. The language of languages. Translation is a common language of languages. A common language of languages. That's a rather mystical phrase. You see, language of languages. We know about the book of books. There is a book in heaven of which all earthly books are copies, you see. So, but for translation to work effectively as a medium of exchange that is in consonance with the principles of equity, justice, etc., there has to be a change in the real world. I'm drawing a distinction between the world of discourse and the real world. In other words, there has to be some change in the global situation, in the power structure, in the economic relations, for translation to play the role that it can. Now, this is, of course, a very key issue, and this point one can keep on talking about this, but I hope I have tried to indicate, I hope I've succeeded in indicating that the issues that are associated with Ngũgĩ deserve debate, discussion, and continued examination. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Kaiser. Now I would like to invite Professor Imran Rahman, Vice Chancellor of University of Liberal Arts, to say a few words about today's symposium and kindly inaugurate the day-long National Symposium. Please welcome Professor Imran Rahman.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to ULAB on this wonderful rainy July. I was just thinking that our English department organizes such fun conferences and symposiums, this being one of them. Today is actually a busy day. Later on, our general education department is doing some kind of a celebration of South Asian literature, which includes, performances, song and dances, and etc. So ULAB is a special place for the learning of literature, global and local. So I'm reminded that, over the last few years, we were privileged to celebrate 3 Nobel laureates. One was Professor Gurna, and I remember we had him in that lawn behind for a wonderful morning session. He spoke. We nearly had Professor Naipaul, V.S. Naipaul. He was in Dhaka, but he was at the Lit Fest, but we couldn't manage to bring him here. And then that really controversial Nobel laureate called Bob Dylan. Remember him? Yeah, I wish we had him here, but we didn't. So instead what we did was we organized a really interesting debate, debating whether he should or should not have received the Nobel Prize Literature. And that debate was followed by a musical session of Dylan's hits, in which I also had the privilege of participating. So I was just thinking, I was sitting here speaking to my colleague, Professor Shamsad, and asking him, the only Nobel laureate in literature we've had is, of course, Tagore, that too many, many years ago. Post-colonial, after partition, we've not had any, but Africa has had 5 Nobel laureates, not necessarily all of them post-colonial. Internationally, Bangladeshi authors are still yet to be read and recognized widely. I must mention that our own President of the Board of Trustees, Dr. Qazi Anis Ahmed, has recently published a novel called Carnivore that has been published by HarperCollins. So it's available in Dhaka in various, including I think our library. So I'd encourage you to have a read. So coming back to this symposium, because I'm a very amateur reader of literature, so the topic is beyond me, which is why, departing from my usual sort of ad hoc, extempore speech, I've actually written something for today. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this special National Symposium, basically celebrating Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. Today we come together not only to reflect on the remarkable body of work left behind by a literary titan, but also to honor a voice that reshaped how we think about language, identity, and liberation. Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o was more than a writer. He was a visionary who challenged us to consider the power of words. Who gets to speak, in what language, and to whom. His passing this May was a moment to revisit his ideas, engage with his provocations, and carry forward his uncompromising belief in the dignity of all cultures. This symposium is not just an academic event, it is a tribute, a gathering of minds and hearts moved by Ngũgĩ's courage and clarity. Through lectures, conversations, and readings, we will engage with his work not as a distant archive, but as a living force, one that continues to speak powerfully to the struggles and hopes of our times. I thank you all, scholars, students, writers, and guests, for joining us. I also thank the organizers for curating this timely and thoughtful program. May the conversations that follow do justice to the man we have come to honor. So welcome, and let the symposium begin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Vice Chancellor, for inaugurating the National Symposium, the day-long National Symposium titled LUTA, LITERÁRIA, Ngũgĩ, and the Battle for Language and Liberation. And a special thanks also to the Special Advisor to the Board of Trustees of ULAB, Professor Shamsad Mortuza, and also to the Dean of School of Arts and Humanities, Professor Kaiser. So this brings us to the end of the inaugural session. So we would now begin. Thank you so much again.